Welcome back to Guff Stuff Weekly Podcast. I guess I'm hosting today. This is Javen Baker, and I have a special guest with me.
Yeah, that would be me, Guff.
That would be Guff himself. Today we're going to talk about a couple different things.
Sounds good.
Kind of our favorite things from being players and DMs within Dungeons & Dragons. So it could be favorite settings, favorite characters, memorable moments. Just kind of do a little bit of reminiscing on what made the game enjoyable or what's memorable for us.
Maybe what keeps us playing the game.
Or what keeps us playing the game, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds fun.
So, yeah. Immediately, whenever I think of favorite things in D&D, my first character I ever made, Ral Ulazek, he was this half-orc ranger. He was absolute badass. Back when rangers were still good.
Yep.
I've made him in every edition I played in him. I used him as an NPC in a lot of different games. Had this wicked backstory for him. Played with him many, probably about a couple of years I played him.
Right.
And, yeah, he was a lot of fun. Memorable moments with him was like, we were on a Githyanki ship and he had one handcuffed. He was a bounty hunter.
Okay.
And so he had one of them handcuffed and then jumping off the ship with the guy and walking the plank, and it's just crazy. Always using acrobatics.
What edition was this?
This is 4th edition.
Oh, okay. So I know nothing about this stuff, so.
I made him for 5th edition as well. Yeah, he was just kind of a nutcase. Very daring, very challenging, chaotic neutral.
Right.
He was all about getting like the most ridiculous thing he could do.
Just to do it, just to try it. Was this your first time playing?
This is my first time playing.
Okay, yeah.
And so, I had a huge attachment to the character, but I also had this kind of death wish with him, where I'm like, how far can I push it before he actually goes over the edge?
Or the DM finally, out.
Yeah, the DM finally has enough. Yeah. And I lucked out with it. I had a really lucky dice. I had my Bumblebee dice. And it just, every time I needed to make a save for something, I rolled that dice and it was always on par. The last thing we did with those guys and in his party was we actually fought an Avatar of Lolth.
Okay.
Which, for those who don't know, an Avatar of Lolth is probably one of the biggest, scariest things you can fight in the game. It's literally a goddess that you're fighting. Her manifestation. So that was really fun. That's just, it immediately jumps out at me for favorite characters.
We both have different. I mean, we both started different generations of D&D. I go back quite a bit farther to first basic edition. I think that's the first time I played was basic. And they gave me a character that was basically developed already, at least partially developed. They didn't have a background. They had some of the background, but back in the basic, this is going to be some foreign talking here for anybody who has never played past even 2nd ed. Basic, when you played a dwarf, that was your class and your race.
Yeah.
Like, that's just what you were. You were a dwarf. And then you maxed your level out at like 9 or 8 or something. That's it. You were done. Of course, nobody tells me this. I'm like 10 years old, 11 years old, so why would they tell me? But they gave me a character, wrote on it a little like 3x5 index card, because that's how characters were written back then.
Yep.
And said, here, this is your character. Have fun. I'm like, sweet, So the first combat, and so it's kind of a stupid story, because you're kind of dumb when you've never played before. You have no idea what's what. But it's probably one of my most memorable moments, just because this is what got me into the whole world of this tabletop RPGs. My combat comes around, and it's my turn to take my turn. And they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, what do you want me to do? Well, you should attack with something. That's literally what he said. You should attack with something. And, of course, I have a hammer, an axe, and, the typical dwarven arsenal.
Yep.
So I'm looking through my equipment, though. It has something called Iron Rat. And I'm like, hell yeah. I'm throwing my Iron Rats out there. They're like, what? Yeah, I'm letting loose the Iron Rat. I'm gonna chuck it out there, and they're like, "You sure you want to do this?" I'm like, "Absolutely." Like, what could be tougher than a rat made of iron, right? And everybody starts laughing. And I roll. I hit the monster. Did nothing, obviously. Well, I did a little, like 2 damage because my strength or something. And then they all start laughing. And I'm like, what's so funny? Why didn't I do more? I don't understand. They're like, well, iron rats are iron rations. They just wrote down rat for short.
Yeah.
And that's what you eat.
I'm like,
so I threw some food at the monster. My first attack ever in an RPG. And that dwarf was named Grant. His last name was Iron Wolf. And I've made him in almost every MMO I could. Because, sometimes names are just not available. I've remade him in most of my systems. Mm-hmm. I don't throw iron rats anymore, though, as it turns out. But yeah, after that, of course, you feel stupid. Everybody's laughing at you. But, it was a great moment. It was, that memorable moment. First time ever playing a game. And my first attack was iron rats.
Yeah.
Which happened to be just my dry rations that I threw at the monster.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah. It's I don't know. But it's funny that the interpretation differences.
Yeah, and it's funny what sticks with you with your characters, too.
Yeah.
Another one of my all-time favorites.
It's got to be Bubba.
Oh, Bubba's Bubba.
Okay.
We'll get to Bubba eventually. Okay. But, Ivan the Strangler.
Oh, yeah.
It was a first edition barbarian, and I don't ever recommend playing a barbarian in first edition. It's a slog, to say the least. So Ivan the Strangler, if I remember the first session, I was a prisoner when they found me.
Okay.
And there was a 6th level monk and a bunch of other big baddies that they were going to fight to get to me. So they started the fight, and the monk's sitting back watching, and I had taken proficiency in garrote.
Oh, there you go.
So I could strangle people to death.
Right.
So I take my manacles, and I walk up behind the monk. I roll a nat 20 on the first roll with the character to hit this monk. And so he's like, yeah, you have her strangled. What are you doing? And I'm like, well, I'm like an 1876 strength. So I'm like,
just keep going.
I'm like, I cross my arms and start spinning, So I got all the XP for killing the first level monk.
Oh, jeez.
And everyone at the table was like, "It's so ridiculous! A first level barbarian killing a 6th level character. It's basically unheard of."
Right.
And so that became Ivan's modus operandi. He was just a strangler.
Ivan the Strangler, so he just strangles people.
Anytime I could do a thematic kill or anything like that, it was always strangling somebody to death.
Right.
And I think the last session I played with him, I had been resurrected from... I was killed in hell.
Okay.
We were in hell. I don't remember what the heck we were doing there. But...
You were there.
I was there, and I sacrificed myself so that the party could get away.
Nice.
I held off what was left of a horde of barbarians by myself.
Oof.
And the party got away. So it's still kind of up in the air. There's headcanon that he was resurrected by a wish spell.
Oof. Would a first level barbarian be happy about that? Coming back with magic?
Yeah, see, he died a warrior's death, so I don't think he would have come back. They wanted him to come back because they wanted him to help fight a lich because he had enough hit points that he could shrug off any of the power words.
Right.
So, if the lich tried to power word stun, which was the scariest one,
right,
at the time, it wouldn't work on Ivan.
Right.
And then he could run in and, at that point, his hands were considered magical weapons.
Right.
Because he was high enough level. So then he could theoretically strangle a lich to death. Not that you could strangle a lich, but you get the idea.
You get the point. Well, you could technically. It just wouldn't be dying of lack of oxygen. It'd be dying of getting its neck snapped off its head. So that's beautiful.
Yeah, he was really, really fun. It was a blast to play him, and he was definitely a I don't care, I'm just gonna do character.
Right.
I can't tell you how many times he got blowed up from breaking artifacts or magical weapons, or because when you break a magical weapon, barbarians got XP for that. So he'd break any magic weapon that the party didn't want. Well, you'd take explosion damage from it when the magic got released.
Yeah,
so
depending on how powerful the weapon was.
Yeah, they had to regrow him I don't know how many times with the ring regeneration. There was a lot of...
Just just because he had to break stuff.
Yeah, it was a lot of regrowing of him.
Yeah, I don't like. There's so many characters I've played over the years. It's hard to pick just any of them that stand out more than the first dwarf that I made. I mean, there's campaigns where I played second ed for, well, it was like 2.25, 2.5, we called it. Because 3 had come out by the time we finished the campaign, and we were starting to use some of the feats that 3 offered. We changed them into non-weapon proficiencies, just so we had more.
Right.
And, I mean, that was a pretty popular character, straight up plain Jane fighter. You know, of course, the DM was an absolute genius the way they described things to make it not obvious what you were seeing. So it was hard to metagame,
right.
if that makes sense. And so the DM at the time was describing it. This is my first major flop with this character. Just a first level fighter, no big deal. But he had a pretty good strength. He had an 18, I think it was in the 80s. I think it was 1880s and something like that. So he was really strong. Had okay wisdom, intelligence. You know, it was questionable. But we were in a hotel. And we're spending the night after adventuring and breaking up this money laundering ring, right?
Okay.
For the king. And everybody was just like nickel and diming you because you knew you had money. So everybody in town was like, and it kind of just got on my nerves, right? So I went upstairs and I'm like, I'm just going to go to bed because this is too much. Well, all of a sudden, there's people downstairs and you could hear they're looking for me. Now, somewhere along the lines, I committed a crime that I didn't realize I committed. I didn't know what it was at the time. And I'm like, crap. So me and the party were like, what do we do? Well, you're part of the party. We're just leaving. I said, okay, well, how do we get up? We're at the top floor of a 3-story hotel type inn thing.
Yeah.
And, well, let's just jump out the window. I'm like, okay, cool. So I open the window and I put all my, I have all this gear, because we just bought a bunch of stuff because we just completed this grand adventure, right?
Yep.
And I hadn't even had a chance to use my new armor and all my weapons. And so it's all in this bag. The DM's like, okay, you open the window, okay. So the DM rolls some dice and says, okay, well, you see now imagine this, we can't metagame, right? And so the DM works really hard at making sure we don't understand what we're seeing. You see a small humanoid person. I said, okay. They're looking up at you. I said, okay. I said, does it, like a humanoid, does it look like a goblin? Does it come old? I'm just trying to gather what it could be. No, it looks human. Oh, but just a short one. Okay. And now it's pointing at me and yelling. I didn't understand the language it was yelling, though. But I wasn't from this area, so who knows what the dialects were in town. I'm like, okay. So the DM's like, what are you going to do? I'm like, well, I have about 100 pounds of gear. I'm going to chuck it. right at the person down there. Look it up. I don't know what it is. It's like a little... In my mind, I'm trying not to metagame. I think it was a gnome or a halfling or something. No, it happens to be a human child.
Oh, no.
But the DM was doing a good enough description of it that at that range, and being it was talking in a foreign language, just a foreign dialect of common, it wasn't even speaking, it was just common, just in a different dialect. I chucked it. 100 pounds of gear at 3 stories hitting a child. Guess what that does? It annihilates the kid. Of course, now I'm a murderer.
Yeah.
And I'm basically a lawful good person.
Yeah.
At normal. So I feel bad. I was going to stay, but the party wouldn't let me. Because they're like, we can't afford to lose a fighter. You have to come with us. Yeah. So
that's brutal.
It was pretty bad. And it's just, those things stay with you forever. Like, is it gaming? I was in college when I did that. So I had already had like 10 years of gaming under my belt. But the DM was just a master. That's what I like about some DMs too, is they're masters at describing things to you in a way that you can't, it's hard to metagame it.
Yeah. Would you say that'd be one of your favorite DMs then?
Oh yeah, by far.
Okay.
Yeah, she was my college. It's funny because I'm from a small town in northern Minnesota. So we don't have a lot of different culture up here. We have the natives and then us. Just the Caucasian, Norwegian, Scandinavian people, right? Which is pretty much what most of this up here is just Scandinavians. And so being exposed to new people sometimes is a little culture shocking.
Yeah.
And so when I went to college, of course, I got exposed to African Americans and Asian Americans, but there's this female that I got put into my. I was in a drama class,
Okay.
some kind of speech class, and they put me, and she has this like half mohawk hair, and it's all colored, and got piercings everywhere. I mean, not everywhere, but enough to.
Gotcha.
And tattoos, and I'm like,
Punk rock.
yeah, punk rock, total dressed like I'm dressed like in my polo shirt, in my slacks, in my sneakers, or my dress shoes or whatever I was wearing. And they're like, everybody get a partner. And I'm like, okay, I didn't know anybody in college. Not anybody in this class. So the teacher's like, okay, you guys don't know anybody. Here, you got who they put me up with.
The punk
This
rock. Yeah.
person that I'm like, oh no. These are the people I see on TV that nobody likes. I'm like, why do I get put with this kind of person? Thank God I did, because she was one of my best friends now today. And probably my favorite DM, just because her creativity. She grew up in Iron Range, of all places.
Oh, okay.
And she's originally from New Jersey and then Florida, but she ended up in Iron Range, and that's where she grew up. And so she just liked to dress different than everybody else.
There's nothing wrong with that.
No, and you know what, though? Growing up in small town USA, you get exposed to all that.
No, you don't.
And so when you do, sometimes there's a little bit of a culture shock. I took it because I'm like, I'm in college. I know things are going to be different. And it was pretty fun. So she's a very well thought out DM, and she has worlds fleshed out, like literally all fleshed out, which at some point we're actually going to work on and make it into a system or a campaign.
Cool.
So that would probably be my favorite DM. I mean, I have other DMs that I like too, don't get me wrong. But if you have to pick a favorite, you have to pick a favorite. Yeah. So that doesn't lesser than any other DMs. Even my first DMs, that didn't lesser the adventures I had with them.
My favorite DM was an old ex-Marine.
Yeah.
And playing with him was just brutal. It was actually the guy who ran the game that I played Ivan in.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And he was just this big guy, very intense. His son DM'd as well and played with us, and he was also pretty intense. But the group we had was so much fun, and he was very good at, like you said, explaining things in a way that you didn't quite
You're
know.
like, I think this is what it means, but you don't want to metagame. And
yeah, and everything we did was like very, you could tell he was ex-military basically, because everything was like, this is moving this way, and then, if like an NPC had a higher intelligence than us, like a significantly higher intelligence, he'd ask us to make our moves and say what we were going to do, and then he would decide what he was going to do. Right. Because they're just that smart. He's not that smart. He knows it.
Right.
But he knew that the NPC was that smart.
Right. So, you're fighting something with
wicked
a lich.
Intelligence. Yeah, like a lich is a great example.
The lich is going to be super smart. He's not going to just him-ha you.
And he's the one that actually was running the game when Ivan passed away.
Oh, no.
So, but it's funny who the people that end up being your good DMs and stuff you don't even think about,
No, right, yeah, no.
You'd never expect it.
No, absolutely not.
And I met him through his son and the game that they played, and yeah, it was a good time.
Yeah. DMs like that I don't want to say they're few and far between, but of course it's hard to replicate that when you've had that experience the first time. And I've had DMs after that are good and they get me into the story, and I love or hate their characters depending on what they want me to do.
Yeah.
And that's good. You want that. It is hard to replicate though, the first really great DM that you have.
So characters, DMs, what about settings?
I played in a lot of the settings because we had like almost every second edition setting and first edition setting possible. So we had almost every setting possible. And so I played in everything except for I even played some Birthright, which was really hard to get for back in the day because only a few game stores even carried mode D&D, let alone carried the obscure. I'd say my favorite setting, if I had to pick one, would have been. Sorry, I had a little hiccup there. But Birthright, we played a little bit of that. But I think my favorite setting, which I didn't get to play a lot of. I only got maybe 3-4 months of, was Spelljammer. The reason, well, it's that between that and Dragonlance. Dragonlance I liked because the whole currency system and the things that were important were not the same things important in Faerun. Like Forgotten Realms, things that were important there were not important in Dragonlance.
Well, Dragonlance doesn't steal your currency.
Yeah, steel was you literally worth more than anything else in the game.
No.
Just because it was such a valuable commodity. So I'll just pick for Spelljammer because you could get to almost every other world, universe, creation with Spelljammer.
Yeah.
And the physics of fighting were completely different. And if you have a DM that knows what they're doing, or that puts time and effort into learning the difference, it can be quite a hoot. Yeah. I'll tell you what. Yeah, and some of my favorite characters played in that system too, because I had my dwarf from my first AD&D. He got recreated in the second ed, and he was one of my first characters on Spelljammer.
Cool.
So I had a cantankerous dwarf with a thunderbolt hammer at like 10th level, because you could actually level past 9 or 8 or whatever it was once in second ed. His race was not his class also. So yeah, I'll pick Spelljammer. And maybe if I played it more extensively, I could say something else. But
it's coming out in 5th.
Yeah, it is coming out.
It might be an episode to talk about later on down the
line.
line.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So is Dragonlance too. So both of them are coming out.
Maybe
we'll flesh them both out pretty good.
Yeah. My favorite setting of all time is similar to Spelljammer. It's in the same vein, same blood. It's Planescape.
Yeah.
And Planescape was the setting of you can go anywhere you want.
Right.
There's multiple different planes of existence that you can travel to. You can go adventure in hell, heaven.
Yep.
You know, and the Mechanicus, the Nirvana plane, the Happy Hunting Grounds. Like I could go on and on about how many different places there were to adventure in the elemental planes, and it was so expansive that it was almost difficult to be pinned down somewhere,
right?
And like have a base, and that's what one of the best features about the system was that the place that they had for home base was a place called Sigil,
right?
If you pronounce it Sigil, you're doing it wrong. It's Sigil. That's how the natives pronounce it there. But it was this donut-shaped city.
Yep.
It turned a ring around itself, and it was floating up in the middle of this wasteland, essentially. And it was known as the City of Doors. You could teleport. You could end up in a trash can if you're holding the key to teleport somewhere, which might be like a dog's tooth to get to hell or something like that. At the wrong time, you could end up just poofing out of existence and going anywhere.
Yep.
And God, I ran a fair amount of Planescape, but I planned and played in my head way more than I ever did run or do for that matter.
It would be hard to find somebody that could, or at least because one, Planescape's expensive stuff.
Yeah, it's spendy. Yeah,
spendy to get into, and two, like you said, to wrap your head around it, you have to have somebody that has good experience in a lot of different systems to do so.
Yeah, and we had it where players would go between Forgotten Realms and Greyhawk even.
Yeah.
And so you need to know all these different settings and have a plethora of knowledge to play. It was really for players too.
Oh yeah.
If you're going to play a planar character, you have to know about all these things or be aware of them at the very least, because this is common knowledge.
Yep.
And it required a big investment from the players and the DM.
Yep.
But the reward for it was so immense.
Right. I played in a lot of Planescape, and I didn't even know that I was playing in it. Because the DM never really told anybody that's what we were playing in. It was that campaign that when we switched over from advanced, we moved off from basic and went into advanced and second ed, and we kind of just went back and forth. Over time, it was a long campaign. But I remember at times we were traveling, and of course at the time I didn't think nothing of it. I only even thought of it now, probably in my mid 40s, where I actually thought about it. When you first started talking about it, went back years ago. it got me thinking, and so that I ended up bumping into the guy who DM'd for us back then, and I talked to him a little bit about it. And he did do that. Was Planescape was basically our method because we went to the Abyss, we went to the Hells, we went to some celestial place, or some mountain. I don't know if it was not like Olympus, it was something else.
Mount Celestia.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, but that was our characters. Our characters were super high level at this point.
And it's a really fun playground.
And of course, we had no clue.
Yeah.
And I think that was the bonus of playing in the Planescape. We had no clue we were in it.
And
the DM was using that as a background without telling us that's what we were doing.
Yeah. And from this point on, anytime I do Dungeons and Dragons,
right,
even if it's not a Planescape game, I'm still thinking Planescape.
Right.
Like it's something that once you do it,
right, it's there.
It's there. So it's like spell jamming.
Yep.
If you know spell jamming's there,
right,
it's always kind of in the back of your mind that okay, if they come across a Githyanki or a Mind Flayer, well, how did they get there? Well, there's either portals in the Underdark leading, somewhere, or they got there by ship.
Yep.
And really cool thing about Spelljammer is the most recent Baldur's Gate game, Baldur's Gate 3, has a spelljamming ship in the very first. That's where you wake up.
That's
so.
I'm so junked out. Like that hooked me so hard.
Yeah, and I've never actually done Spelljammer.
Oh yeah, it's great.
So now that it's coming out in 5th edition, that might even be a reason for me to come back to 5th.
Right.
I've stepped away from 5th for a while just because there's other games I want to play.
Well, there's a lot, yeah.
But I mean,
it's kind of
if you're telling me Spelljammer's a thing, man, that gets the blood going.
Yeah. It's something that you've never got to experience before, and everything plays differently. You can't assume that everything plays the same. You're literally in space, so you have limited amounts of oxygen. Your spells don't work the same way.
Nope.
Gravity's definitely not the same way. You have to rely on the spellcaster, so you keep him alive no matter what. Otherwise, your ship just goes afloat. And I'm assuming 5th Ed won't change much of that particular part of it.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll still have a helmsman and all.
Yeah, you have to have somebody to cast spells to run a helm.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you just sit there in space. I mean, there are other types of helms where you can put magic items in or hook up a life force, but them are generally evil. Spelljammer. What a monster of a system. And Planescape. Between them two, I don't know. It's hard to beat those two systems overall together.
Yeah, and you said Dragonlance is another notable one for you. A second notable one for me would be Dark Sun.
Yep.
Which is this Conan style.
Very dark.
Magic is evil.
Yep.
Post-apocalyptic wasteland Dungeons and Dragons setting.
Introduced psionics to the world.
And it really fleshed out the psionic system.
Yeah, she probably fleshed it out more than it introduced it.
But they had rules for psionic combat using different manifestations and oh my goodness, what a setting! If you can ever get your hands on even a PDF of it, I highly recommend it.
For nothing else, just to read it.
Just to read it, and the novels. There's tons of novels for it. Kind of definitely feels like 90s pulp, fantasy novels. Yep. But Dark Sun is my other notable mention for that.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, there you go. No, Dark Sun is not bad. I never played much of it. Never, at least not that I recall. That's probably good because I didn't understand psionics near as much as other people did. That was just too much brain power for me. There was a lot of complexity involved in it.
There is. Yeah.
And maybe, I don't know if they reintroduce it at some point in the future. I mean, they've dabbled in a little bits of it in 5th Ed. But I think it's just mostly for the monsters. And I think they're mostly trying to use it around magic instead of the brain power stuff. So, I don't know. I guess, though, the introduction to Spelljammer and Dragonlance means you have to have a way to get from point A to point B.
Yeah.
And Spelljammer brings you pretty much everywhere. Maybe they'll have some Dark Sun snipping in there somehow. I know old lore, you can't do that, but 5th Ed's also said that anything past 5th Ed is no longer viable, so they can change the rules now however they want.
Yeah. And I could see them maybe redoing Dark Sun. I mean, there's no other setting like it.
Right. No.
It's
its own beast.
Post-apocalyptic.
Right.
And they've touched on they've given us planar settings as well in 5th Ed.
Yep.
some of the adventures that have come out have been planar adventures, especially the free ones. And Chris Perkins has run plenty of games that revolve around different planes of existence.
Yep.
Jeremy Crawford has as well.
Right. Yeah.
Those are two big names in 5th Ed if you're familiar with them.
Absolutely.
But, I mean, all in all, there's just these are the things that keep us coming back to D&D.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's too many years of lore and history. It's hard to. I mean, you can take some of that and bring it to new games, which we have done, and I've enjoyed playing pretty much every new game we've tried. But it's hard to not go back when 5th Ed says, "Hey, guess what? We're bringing this in," or Wizards of the Coast says, "Hey, we're bringing this in."
Or you develop a 20-year friendship, and it's something that you can talk about.
Yeah, right, yeah, exactly. It's just something, something like I know if I call my friends up from that era, back when I was in college, and I said, "Hey, we're gonna do a weekending. We'll go to Vegas, whatever.
Yeah.
We're gonna get a hotel room, and we're just gonna hardcore game it." Every one of them would do it.
That'd be awesome.
They would just, "Hey, let's do it. We're gonna run all-nighters." Obviously, we're old now, and we'd have to have naps, but we'd do it. We'd do it.
Absolutely.
They would all show up, and they'd all have a party, and we'd all go home, and no problems done.
If you've never done a 24-hour D&D session, you have not lived. I'm telling you.
It can be very interesting.
It's as having been on the DMing side of that, it is crazy and wild and just never what you expect.
Yep.
But man, is it fun?
Yeah. No, it's just it's hard to beat that. It really is. It's hard to beat that. It's good times, and you can develop a lot of good friendships and just learn a lot of stuff. I mean, I don't know how much stuff we've learned by just playing, whether we've learned physics of how to break walls or blow stuff up or whatever. We've just learned how to do that in games.
Well, one of the biggest things is you learn how to get along with people.
That's true. Even people you necessarily don't like. You're like, well, I'm stuck in a campaign with them that might go on for years. I guess I better figure this out.
I've seen so many people socially expand and become more apt in social interactions from just playing D&D.
Yep.
But before we get off topic, I think that kind of covers what we wanted to talk about today. Kind of our favorite things, be it people, characters, settings.
Yep.
Sorry this went a little long, but it is a easy topic to talk about. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, absolutely. Great. Well, I suppose I'll end it then.
Yeah, if you want to.
And thank you all for spending a few minutes listening to us. Feel free to message us, contact us, however you want. You can find, it's easy to find Guff stuff, whatever, on any social media. I'm everywhere. And harass us a little bit. Tell us what your favorite things are. Heck, maybe one time you call into the podcast and you tell us what your favorite thing is and your favorite characters, and we'll have you on.
We'll always be open to suggestions for ideas as well.
Heck yeah. Anyway, until next time, my name is Scott. You call me Guff. Signing off.
All right.